Hello, my dear viewers. Today will be a very interesting story. I recommend watching the video to the end. Put a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and be sure to write comments on what you liked or did not like, and if you have an interesting criminal story from your life. Write your story in the comments and I will make a video and tell your story here on the channel. Okay, I have detained you. I wish you a good mood and viewing. My name is Linda Carter, and a month ago my life turned upside down. I had always thought of our family as unshakable. Sure, we had our struggles, who doesn't? But we'd faced them together. At least, that's what I believed. It was a quiet Thursday evening when the phone rang. The voice on the other end was cold and formal. "Mrs. Carter, this is Officer Bradley. We need you to come down to the station to discuss an incident involving your son." I froze. My son? Tyler? What happened? "I think it's better if we talk in person," he said. When I arrived at the station, my heart was pounding. Tyler sat in a small room, his head bowed, his expression unreadable. Beside him was my husband, Richard. His arm was in a sling, and a deep bruise marred his cheek. "What is going on?" I demanded, my voice trembling. Richard looked at me with a mixture of anger and defiance. "Your son attacked me, Linda. He needs to learn that there are consequences for his actions." Tyler looked up, his jaw clenched. "I didn't do it for no reason," he said quietly. After the officer stepped out, I sat down beside Tyler, my heart breaking as I saw the pain in his eyes. "Tyler, what happened? Why would you do this?" He hesitated before answering, his voice low. "Mom, he was cheating on you. I caught him with someone else." I stared at him, stunned. "What do you mean? How do you know that?" "I saw them," he said. "I was coming home from a friend's house and saw Dad at a cafe. He wasn't alone. He was holding hands with another woman, and they left together." I felt the room spinning, my mind struggling to process his words. Richard had always been charming, but I never thought he'd betray me like this. "And you?" confronted him. I asked. Tyler nodded. "I couldn't just let it go, Mom. He's been lying to you, and I couldn't stand it any more." When I walked out of the room to speak with Richard, he immediately launched into a tirade. "Your son is out of control, Linda. He attacked me in my own home like some kind of maniac." I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "Richard, Tyler says he saw you with another woman. Is it true?" His face turned red, and he avoided my gaze. "That has nothing to do with this," he snapped. "The fact is, he put his hands on me, and he needs to face the consequences." "You're really going to press charges against your own son?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I don't have a choice," he said. "He crossed a line, Linda. You know that night, after Tyler was released on bail, I knew we needed help. I called my friend, Maria, who was a paralegal and knew the ins and outs of the legal system." "Linda, this is a tricky situation," Maria said. "Assault charges can be serious, even in family cases. But if you can prove there were mitigating circumstances, like provocation, it could work in Tyler's favor." "Provocation?" I asked. "If Tyler acted in a moment of heightened emotion, especially if he believed he was defending you in some way, the court might consider it," she explained. Her words gave me a glimmer of hope. "What do we need to do?" "You'll need to gather evidence," Maria said. "Anything that supports Tyler's claim about Richard's infidelity and why he acted the way he did." The next morning, I started going through Richard's belongings, searching for anything that might confirm Tyler's story. It felt wrong to invade his privacy, but I had no choice. In his briefcase, I found receipts for expensive dinners at places we'd never gone to together. There were texts on his phone from a number saved as Jay, filled with flirty messages and plans to meet. I took photos of everything, my hands trembling as I pieced together the evidence. It hurt deeply to see proof of Richard's betrayal, but my priority now was protecting Tyler. I sat at the kitchen table that night, staring at the pile of receipts and messages I'd uncovered from Richard's briefcase. The air felt heavier than ever, as though the house itself was reacting to the secrets it now held. Tyler was in his room, silent. He hadn't said much since we got home from the police station, but I knew the weight of what happened was crushing him. I wanted to comfort him, to tell him it would all be okay, but I didn't even know if that was true. I picked up one of the receipts, a fancy steakhouse downtown, dated 3 weeks ago. I remembered that night clearly. Richard had told me he was working late. The memory stung, but I forced myself to focus. Maria's advice echoed in my head: gather evidence. I needed to build a case to show the court why Tyler wasn't to blame. If Richard wanted to press charges, I would make sure the truth came out. The next morning, I knocked on Tyler's bedroom door. When he didn't answer, I slowly opened it to find him sitting on the edge of his bed, staring at the floor. His face was pale, and there were dark circles under his eyes. "Can I come in?" I asked gently. He nodded, and I sat beside him. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. Then I reached out and took his hand. "Tyler, I need you to tell me everything," I said. "I know this is hard, but we need to get through it together." "What exactly happened that night?" He hesitated, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to hurt him, Mom. I swear. I saw red." He explained how he'd confronted Richard after catching him at the cafe with another woman. I told him I knew what he was doing, and he just laughed. He said it wasn't my business and that I didn't understand how relationships worked. My stomach twisted as I listened. "And then what?" "He pushed me," Tyler said, his voice breaking. "He told me to stay out of it, but I couldn't. I shoved him back and he fell. I didn't hit him, Mom. I didn't punch him or anything. I hugged him tightly, my heart aching for him. "We'll figure this out," I promised. Maria agreed to meet us that afternoon at her office. I brought all the evidence I'd found, photos of the texts, the receipts, everything. Tyler sat beside me, looking nervous but determined. Maria spread the papers out on her desk, studying them carefully. "This is good," she said. "It shows a clear pattern of infidelity. But we need more than just proof that Richard was cheating. We need to show that Tyler's actions were a result of provocation, not malice." "What do you suggest?" I asked. "We'll need statements," Maria replied. "Anyone who can testify to Tyler's character or who saw the incident that night. And we need to frame this as a response to a deeply emotional situation, not a premeditated act." Tyler looked at me, his eyes wide. "You mean I'll have to go to court?" Maria nodded. "If Richard doesn't drop the charges, yes. But if we present this evidence effectively, we can argue for leniency. The court will see you as a young man who acted impulsively, not as a criminal." That evening, I called Richard. I didn't want to speak to him, but I needed to try one last time to resolve this without dragging Tyler through the legal system. He answered on the second ring, his tone cold. "What do you want, Linda?" "I want to talk about Tyler," I said. "Richard, this doesn't have to go to court. He's your son. We can handle this as a family." Richard scoffed. "Handle it, Linda," he attacked me. "He needs to learn that actions have consequences." "You're the one who's been lying to us," I snapped, my anger bubbling over. You're the one who's been cheating and sneaking around. Tyler reacted because he saw you for what you are, a liar. There was a long pause on the other end. When Richard finally spoke, his voice was calm but cutting. This isn't about me, Linda. It's about Tyler, and I'm not dropping the charges. I hung up, my hands shaking. The next day, I got an unexpected call from one of Tyler's friends, Jason. Mrs. Carter, I heard what happened, he said. I just wanted you to know I was there that night. I saw everything. My heart skipped a beat. Jason, you saw the argument between Tyler and Richard. Yes, he said. I was waiting for Tyler outside, and I saw him and Mr. Carter arguing through the window. Mr. Carter was yelling at Tyler, and he pushed him first. Tyler didn't hit him, he just shoved him back. Would you be willing to tell the court that? I asked. There was a pause, and then Jason said, if it helps Tyler. Yes. I'll do it. I hung up, feeling a renewed sense of hope. With Jason's testimony and the evidence Maria had compiled, we had a fighting chance. Jason's willingness to testify was a breakthrough, but Maria stressed that we needed more to solidify Tyler's defense. Over the next few days, she worked tirelessly, piecing together a narrative that would paint a clear picture of what happened that night. We need to show the court that Tyler acted impulsively in a moment of emotional distress, Maria explained during one of our meetings. It's not about excusing his actions, it's about providing context. I spent hours combing through old photos and letters, compiling anything that could attest to Tyler's character. He wasn't a violent person, far from it. He'd always been the kid who helped his classmates, who volunteered at food drives, who stayed late to help clean up after soccer games. Maria also reached out to a counselor who had worked with families in similar situations. She believed their testimony about the emotional toll of infidelity and betrayal could be invaluable. Trust me, Linda, Maria said, her voice steady, we're building a strong case. Now we just need to prepare Tyler for what's coming. Tyler's confidence had been shaky ever since the incident, but Maria insisted on preparing him thoroughly for his day in court. You'll need to stay calm, she told him during a mock cross-examination. The prosecutor will try to rattle you, but you can't let them see that. Just stick to the truth. I'll try, Tyler said, his voice quiet. Don't try to, Maria said firmly. You're a good person, Tyler, and the court needs to see that. Speak from the heart. Be honest about what you felt that night and why you acted the way you did. We practiced for hours, going over potential questions and responses. Tyler's nerves were evident, but by the end of the session, I saw a spark of determination in his eyes. The court date arrived faster than I expected. Walking into the courthouse that morning, my stomach felt like it was tied in knots. Tyler walked beside me, his shoulders squared but his face pale. Maria led the way, her briefcase swinging purposefully at her side. Richard sat on the other side of the courtroom, looking polished and smug in his suit. Seeing him like that made my anger bubble up all over again. How could he do this to his own son? The prosecutor wasted no time trying to discredit Tyler. You claim you were provoked, but isn't it true that you physically pushed your father out of anger? She asked. Tyler took a deep breath. I did push him, but I didn't do it out of malice. I was upset because I saw him cheating on my mom. I confronted him, and he pushed me first. I reacted without thinking. The prosecutor's eyes narrowed. So you admit to losing control? Yes, Tyler said, his voice steady. But I never intended to hurt him. Jason was the next to take the stand. As he recounted what he saw that night, the courtroom was silent. I was outside the house, waiting for Tyler, Jason said. I saw Mr. Carter and Tyler through the window. They were arguing. Mr. Carter was yelling at him, and then he pushed Tyler. Tyler pushed back, but it wasn't a fight. It was more like a reflex. The prosecutor tried to poke holes in Jason's story, but he remained calm and consistent. By the time he stepped down, I could see a shift in the courtroom. People were starting to see Tyler not as an aggressor, but as a young man caught in an emotional storm. Maria called the counselor to the stand next. They spoke about the psychological impact of infidelity on families, especially when children feel compelled to defend a parent. Infidelity can create deep emotional wounds, the counselor explained. When a child witnesses betrayal, it can trigger feelings of anger, confusion, and even protectiveness. In cases like this, actions that might seem aggressive are often impulsive responses to intense emotional stress. Their testimony was powerful, and I could see some members of the jury nodding along. Maria had done an incredible job framing Tyler's actions in the broader context of what our family had endured. As the counselor stepped down, Maria turned to Tyler. "This is your chance," she said softly. "The jury needs to hear your side, from your heart. Be honest, and don't let their questions shake you." Tyler nodded, his hands gripping the edge of the table as he stood. He adjusted his tie, a tie he rarely wore. One I'd helped him pick out that morning. He walked to the stand slowly, his shoulders stiff but his chin raised. The courtroom was silent as Tyler was sworn in. Maria approached him first, her voice calm and encouraging. "Tyler," she began, "can you explain to the court how you were feeling that night?" He hesitated for a moment, his eyes darting briefly to me before he spoke. "I was angry," he admitted, "angry, confused, and hurt. I saw my dad with another woman that night, and it broke me. I couldn't believe he'd do something like that to my mom." Maria nodded, her tone steady. "When you confronted your father, how did he respond?" Tyler swallowed hard. He laughed at me, told me I didn't understand how relationships worked. When I pushed him on it, when I asked how he could betray her, he shoved me. It wasn't hard, but it felt like he was telling me to back off, like none of it mattered. And I just reacted. Maria's gaze softened. "Did you mean to hurt him?" "No," Tyler said firmly. "I wasn't thinking clearly. I just wanted him to understand how much he'd hurt us, but I never wanted him to get hurt physically." The prosecutor's heels clicked sharply against the tile floor as she approached Tyler. Her expression was sharp, her eyes narrowing as she prepared to dissect his testimony. "Mr. Carter," she began, "you claim you acted out of emotional distress. But isn't it true that you followed your father into the house, escalating the argument?" Tyler shifted slightly in his seat. "I didn't follow him to escalate anything. I wanted to talk to him, to understand why he did what he did." The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. "And yet you admit to pushing him. Isn't it true that you acted out of anger?" "I was angry," Tyler admitted, his voice steady, "but I didn't plan to hurt him. It wasn't about anger, it was about everything building up inside me. I didn't know how to handle it." "Didn't know how to handle it," the prosecutor repeated, her tone skeptical. "So you resorted to violence." "It wasn't violence," Tyler said, his voice rising slightly. "It was a split-second reaction. I didn't stop to think, it just happened." His words hung in the air, and for a moment, even the prosecutor seemed to pause. Tyler's honesty was raw, and it was clear he wasn't trying to dodge responsibility. The next day, Maria told me I'd have the opportunity to make a statement as part of Tyler's defense. I spent the entire night thinking about what to say, writing and rewriting my words until they felt right. When I stepped onto the stand, my hands trembled slightly, but I took a deep breath and focused on the jury. Tyler is my son, I began, my voice steady despite the emotions bubbling beneath the surface. He's not perfect, no one is, but he's a good person. He's kind, thoughtful, and fiercely loyal to the people he loves. I paused, glancing at Richard, who was sitting stiffly at the prosecution's table. When Tyler saw his father's betrayal, it shattered him. Our family has always been built on trust, and in that moment, he felt like that foundation had crumbled. He acted impulsively, yes, but not out of malice. He acted because he cared, because he believed in standing up for what's right. The room was silent, every pair of eyes fixed on me. I looked directly at the jury, willing them to see Tyler the way I did. My son isn't a criminal. He's a young man who made a mistake in a moment of pain. I hope you can see that, too. After days of tense arguments and testimony, the jury finally deliberated. The courtroom was packed as the foreperson stood, holding the small piece of paper that would determine Tyler's future. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear the judge asking for the verdict. We find the defendant, Tyler Carter, not guilty of assault, the foreperson said, but guilty of misdemeanor disorderly conduct. A wave of relief washed over me. Disorderly conduct was a minor charge. It wouldn't destroy Tyler's future. He would have to pay a fine and complete community service, but he wouldn't face jail time. Tyler looked at me from the defendant's table, his eyes wide with disbelief. I gave him a small nod, tears streaming down my face. In the weeks that followed, Tyler worked tirelessly to complete his community service. He volunteered at a local shelter, helping families in crisis. It was hard work, but I could see how much it meant to him to give back and make amends. As for Richard, he moved out of the house shortly after the trial. He and I spoke only once more, a brief conversation about finalizing the divorce. I didn't feel anger anymore, just a sense of closure. Tyler and I began to rebuild our lives piece by piece. There were still hard days, moments when the memories of the trial resurfaced. But through it all, we found strength in each other. One evening, as we sat together on the porch, Tyler turned to me and said, "I'm sorry for everything. Mom, I wish I'd handled things differently." I took his hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "We can't change the past," I said, "but we can learn from it. And we're stronger now because of it. The road ahead wasn't perfect, but it was ours." And for the first time in months, I felt hopeful. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. This will help me work better and faster for you. I would be grateful, so watch my other videos. Hello, my dear viewers. Today will be a very interesting story. I recommend watching the video to the end. Put a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and be sure to write comments on what you liked or did not like, and if you have an interesting criminal story from your life. Write your story in the comments and I will make a video and tell your story here on the channel. Okay, I have detained you. I wish you a good mood and viewing. My name is Laura Bennett, and up until a month ago, I thought I knew everything about my son, Ethan. He was 23 years old, kind, responsible, and always did well in school. After graduating from college, he started working at a local bank, a respectable job he seemed to enjoy. But everything changed the day I found the money. It was an ordinary afternoon, and I was cleaning out the storage closet in the basement. Ethan had moved back home temporarily, or so he'd said, while saving up for his own place. The closet was packed with boxes he'd brought with him, most of them unlabeled. One box, shoved into the farthest corner, caught my eye. It was taped shut, and something about it felt off. I pulled it out, cutting through the tape with scissors. Inside were bundles of cash neatly wrapped in plastic. I froze, my mind reeling. I started counting, but after the first bundle, I realized there was far too much to count by hand. It had to be at least $1 million. My first thought was that Ethan had been saving it. Maybe he'd inherited it or won it somehow. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. People don't just have $1 million lying around. That evening, I waited for Ethan to come home. The box was on the dining room table, and my hands trembled as I sat there, waiting. When he walked through the door, he stopped short, his eyes darting from me to the box. "Where did you find that?" he asked, his voice sharp. "In the basement," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Ethan, what is this? Where did it come from?" He hesitated, his jaw tightening. "It's complicated, Mom, complicated," I repeated. "Ethan, this is $1 million. You need to tell me what's going on." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I can't explain everything right now, but you have to trust me. It's fine." "It's not fine," I snapped. "You're hiding something. Tell me the truth, Ethan. Please." He looked away, his shoulders slumping. "It's better if you don't know," he muttered. The next day, I was drinking my morning coffee when a news report flashed across the TV. The headline made my blood run cold. "Local bank robbery, $1 million stolen in daring heist." The reporter went on to describe how the thieves had bypassed security systems, leaving no physical evidence behind. The authorities were baffled, and the investigation was ongoing. I stared at the screen, my heart racing. The timeline matched perfectly. Ethan had brought those boxes home around the same time the robbery happened. Could it be possible? Had my son stolen that money? I couldn't ignore the possibility, no matter how much I wanted to believe Ethan was innocent. While he was at work, I went back to the basement and searched through his other boxes. Most of them contained ordinary items, clothes, books, and old school supplies. But tucked inside a backpack, I found something chilling, a mask and a pair of gloves. My hands shook as I pulled them out. The mask was plain and black, the kind used to conceal someone's identity. The gloves were thick, designed to avoid leaving fingerprints. There was no denying it now. Ethan had been involved in the robbery. When Ethan came home that evening, I didn't wait for him to settle in. I marched up to him, holding the mask and gloves. "Explain this," I demanded, my voice trembling. Ethan's face went pale. "Mom, I can explain." "You better start explaining now." I cut him off. "I saw the news. I know about the robbery." "Ethan, what have you done?" He sighed heavily, sinking onto the couch. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," he said quietly. "It was just a plan to get back at the bank. They've been underpaying employees for years, and—" It spiraled out of control. My heart broke as I listened to him. "Ethan, you've stolen $1 million. Do you realize what that means? This isn't just about getting back at a company. This is a crime." "I know," he whispered, his voice full of regret, but I didn't know what else to do. After Ethan's confession, I spent the night pacing the living room, unable to sleep. My mind raced with questions and fears. How could my son, the boy I raised to be kind and honest, have done something like this? But more pressing was the decision I now faced. Should I turn him in? I couldn't bear the thought of Ethan in jail, but the stolen money sitting in my basement felt like a ticking time bomb. The police would come looking eventually, and if they found the money here, I'd be implicated too. By morning, I still hadn't made a decision. Ethan had left for work as if everything was normal, but I knew I couldn't keep pretending. That afternoon, there was a knock at the door. My heart sank as I opened it to find two detectives standing on the porch. "Good afternoon, Mum," one of them said, flashing his badge. "I'm Detective Parker, and this is Detective Mills. We're investigating the recent robbery at First National Bank. Do you mind if we ask you a few questions?" I forced a smile, trying to steady my voice. "Of course, please come in." The detectives asked if I'd noticed anything unusual recently, strangers in the neighborhood, suspicious activity. I played dumb, shaking my head and insisting I hadn't seen anything out of the ordinary. But I could tell they were studying me, watching for any sign of nervousness. "Thank you for your time," Detective Parker said as they left. "If you think of anything, give us a call." I closed the door, my hands trembling. They didn't suspect me yet. But how long would that last? After the detectives left, I knew I had to move the money. If they came back with a warrant, they'd find it, and Ethan and I would both be in trouble. I packed the cash into an old duffel bag and drove to a storage facility on the edge of town. The facility was nearly empty, and the attendant barely glanced at me as I rented a unit. Once the money was safely locked away, I felt a small sense of relief. But it was temporary. The problem wasn't solved, it was just delayed. That evening, I confronted Ethan again. "I moved the money," I said bluntly. "The police came by today." "They're asking questions." Ethan's face fell. "I didn't want to drag you into this, Mom. I thought I could handle it on my own." "Handle it?" I snapped. "You've stolen $1 million, Ethan. How do you think this ends?" He ran a hand through his hair, sighing. "I wasn't going to keep it. I just wanted to scare them, make them pay for how they've treated their employees. But once I had it, I didn't know what to do." "You need to turn yourself in," I said firmly. Ethan looked at me like I'd suggested the unthinkable. "No, I can't. I'll go to prison. Mom, I'll lose everything." "And what happens if you don't?" I countered. "Do you think you can outrun this forever?" The next morning, I made a decision. If Ethan wasn't going to turn himself in, I'd have to do it for him, but I needed to do it in a way that minimized the damage. I contacted a lawyer, explaining the situation in vague terms. The lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Diane, agreed to meet with us that afternoon. When Ethan realized where we were going, he panicked. "You can't do this," he shouted. "You're betraying me." "I'm saving you," I said firmly. "If we do this right, we might be able to negotiate a deal. But if the police find you first, it's over." Diane sat across from us in her sleek, minimalistic office, her sharp eyes darting between Ethan and me. She'd listened carefully as I laid out the situation, her expression remaining unreadable. "This is serious," she said finally, leaning forward. "$1 million theft isn't something the authorities will overlook. If you turn yourself in now, there's a chance we can negotiate a deal cooperation in exchange for leniency. But the longer you wait, the worse this will get." Ethan fidgeted in his seat, his head lowered. "And if I don't turn myself in?" he asked hesitantly. Diane's tone grew stern. "If they catch you, they'll throw the book at you. You'll face the full weight of the law, no plea deals, no mercy." "Is that what you want?" Ethan didn't respond, and I could see the fear in his eyes. "Think about your future, Ethan," I said softly. "This is your chance to make things right. Don't throw it away." Ethan finally nodded, though his reluctance was clear. "Fine," he muttered. "I'll do it." Diane nodded approvingly. "Good. Here's what we'll do. I'll contact the authorities and arrange for a formal surrender. You'll cooperate fully, return the money, and provide any details they need about how this happened. It's the best way to show remorse and take responsibility. Ethan swallowed hard, his hands clenched into fists. How long will I go to prison? Diane sighed. That depends on the prosecutor and the judge. With cooperation, we can argue for a reduced sentence, but you'll still serve time. There's no avoiding that. The reality of the situation hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. I reached over, placing a hand on his arm. We'll get through this, I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. The days leading up to Ethan's surrender were some of the most tense of my life. Diane worked tirelessly to prepare him, coaching him on what to say and how to present himself during the initial meeting with the authorities. Meanwhile, I tried to keep the house in order, though every creak of the floorboards or knock on the door made my heart race. I felt like we were living on borrowed time, each moment a fragile reprieve before everything came crashing down. Ethan spent most of his time in his room, avoiding me. When I finally forced him to talk, he admitted he was terrified. "I don't know what's going to happen, Mom," he said, his voice trembling. "What if I can't handle prison? What if I never get my life back?" "You will," I said firmly, though my throat felt tight. "This is a mistake, Ethan, but it doesn't define you. What defines you is how you make it right." The day of Ethan's surrender arrived. Diane had arranged for him to meet with Detective Parker and the prosecutor at the police station. As we drove there, the air in the car was heavy with unspoken fears. When we arrived, Ethan hesitated at the station's entrance. "I can't do this," he said, shaking his head. "You can," I said, taking his hand. "I'm here, and I'll be with you every step of the way." Diane met us inside and led Ethan to a conference room where the detectives and a stern-looking prosecutor were waiting. Ethan took a deep breath and began to speak, recounting how he'd planned and carried out the robbery. He admitted to everything, his voice shaking but steady. When he finished, the room was silent. Detective Parker finally nodded. "Thank you for your honesty, Ethan. This will go a long way in determining your sentence." With Diane's guidance, we retrieved the money from the storage unit and handed it over to the authorities. Watching them count and catalog the bills was surreal, a stark reminder of the gravity of what had happened. "You did the right thing," I told Ethan as we left the station. "I'm proud of you for facing this," but Ethan didn't respond. He looked lost, as though a part of him had already given up. The courthouse was an imposing building, its gray stone facade stark against the bright morning sky. As Ethan and I walked through the doors, my stomach churned with anxiety. The long marble halls echoed with every step, a reminder of how far this journey had taken us. Inside the courtroom, the air was heavy with tension. Reporters were stationed in the back, their cameras clicking as Ethan took his seat at the defendant's table beside Diane. I sat behind him, clutching my hands tightly in my lap, trying to steady my breathing. The prosecutor wasted no time painting Ethan as reckless and dangerous. He spoke about how the robbery had jeopardized employees' safety and eroded trust in the banking system. His voice was cold and calculated, each word a hammer blow to my heart. When Diane spoke, her tone was calm and measured. She explained how Ethan's actions, while undeniably wrong, stemmed from frustration with systemic injustice. She emphasized his remorse, his willingness to return the stolen money, and his cooperation with the investigation. Finally, it was Ethan's turn to speak. He stood slowly, his hands trembling slightly as he faced the judge. His voice cracked as he began. "Your Honor, I know what I did was wrong. I let my anger cloud my judgment, and I made decisions that hurt people. There's no excuse for that. I take full responsibility, and I'm truly sorry." He glanced back at me. His eyes filled with tears. To my mother, who has stood by me through all of this, I'm sorry for disappointing you. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right." His words hung in the air, and for a moment the courtroom was silent. The judge's face was unreadable as he leaned forward to deliver his decision. Every second felt like an eternity. My heart pounded in my chest as I gripped the edge of the bench in front of me. "Mr. Bennett," the judge began, his tone grave, "your actions were a blatant violation of the law and placed innocent people at risk. However, the court also recognizes your cooperation and genuine remorse." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room before settling on Ethan. "It is the decision of this court to sentence you to 5 years in state prison with the possibility of parole after 2 years, provided you meet all conditions of rehabilitation." A gasp escaped my lips and tears blurred my vision. 5 years. It wasn't as long as I feared, but hearing the sentence made everything feel painfully real. Ethan nodded solemnly, his face pale but composed. As the bailiff approached to take him into custody, he turned to me one last time. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said, his voice breaking. "I love you, Ethan," I whispered, my words trembling. As he was led away, the weight of the moment crashed down on me. My son was going to prison, and there was nothing I could do to change that. The first week without Ethan was the hardest. The house was too quiet, every corner a reminder of his absence. I found myself standing in his empty bedroom, running my hand over the neatly made bed, wishing he were still there. Letters became our lifeline. Ethan wrote to me every week, detailing his days in prison, the routine, the people he met, and the programs he was attending. He joined a vocational training course and had started working in the prison library. "Mom," he wrote in one letter, "I'm trying to make the best of this. It's not easy, but I want you to know that I'm doing everything I can to come out of this a better person." His words gave me hope, but the ache of missing him never went away. I threw myself into volunteering at the local community center, helping families in crisis. It gave me purpose and kept my mind occupied, but every day felt incomplete without Ethan. 2 years later, I stood outside the prison gates, waiting for Ethan's release. The air was crisp, the sky a brilliant blue, but my heart felt heavy with anticipation. When the gates finally opened, Ethan stepped out, looking older and leaner, but with a quiet strength in his eyes. He spotted me immediately and broke into a smile, dropping his bag as he pulled me into a tight hug. "Mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "thank you for never giving up on me. I'm so proud of you," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. Over the next few months, Ethan worked tirelessly to rebuild his life. He got a job at a community center, mentoring at-risk youth and helping them avoid the mistakes he'd made. His story became a source of inspiration, a reminder that redemption was possible even after the darkest of times. Ethan's parole officer, impressed with his progress, gave him glowing reviews, and his efforts didn't go unnoticed by the community. Slowly but surely, he began to rebuild the trust he had lost. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Ethan turned to me. "Do you ever think about what could have happened if I hadn't gotten caught?" he asked. I nodded. "I do. And I think about how much worse it could have been if you hadn't faced the truth." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I don't regret turning myself in. It was hard, but it was the right thing to do, and now I finally feel free." Hearing those words filled me with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. The road to this point had been long and painful, but we had come through it stronger and closer than ever. Ethan's journey wasn't just about redemption, it was about resilience, growth, and the power of unconditional love. And as we sat there, the future stretched out before us, full of hope and second chances. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. This will help me work better and faster for you. I would be grateful, so watch my other videos.